Hey everybody, Chris Amy here, back with another Secret Entourage video, and today I wanted to talk about the school system a little bit. Joining me today is Joseph Martin, JT, which you may have seen in some of my other videos as kind of the key videographer slash photographer of some of my brands out there. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the school system, and I wanted to kind of bring him into the conversation instead of having him behind the camera, because he's a younger individual that kind of fits the model of what the education system is today, because it certainly is very different than when I went to school and I never got a chance to go to college, or graduate I should say. I did go to college, just never really did anything with it. And so I wanted to kind of like have this conversation, open conversation. And of course, for you guys watching, you should definitely like, comment on this video on your thoughts as we're having this conversation, of course, because we want to open a dialogue about how the education system is ultimately fucked. So you went to school or not?
Yeah.
what
I think everybody has to at some point.
Okay, but did you go to college?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no, you mean college?
Yeah, did you graduate college?
No.
So you never even went, like,
No,
not even
no,
for a
no.
semester, so you didn't, okay. So why did you decide not to go to college? Like, because I'm just curious, like, there's a lot of young people today that also look at college and they go, this is useless. But like,
I mean, my number one reason was because I knew that what I was doing, I didn't need to go for.
Okay, well, so what were you doing? Like, what was that reasoning?
Photography, filmmaking, design, I mean, it's an art.
Okay, did you not want to go to, like, film school?
No, I had definitely no, I didn't need to.
Okay, so
I felt confident in my own ability to learn these things on my own,
So it's very direct for you. You're very, like, headstrong about it. You're like,
yeah.
I didn't need to go, I never went, I never tried, right? So why do you feel like it was so unvaluable that it never even crossed your path as to, like, should I go? You know, because some kids today, they might look at it and go, well, maybe I should go. You know, like, maybe I shouldn't. Like,
Yeah.
is this related? But for you, it's a hard no. You're like, well, completely useless. I'm just curious as to, like,
I just
what are
hate
your
the
thoughts?
whole, I hate the whole education system from, kindergarten up till college, because I feel like they're training you to be an employee.
But that's what they were created for.
Right. So
Right,
that's
I
why I
mean,
hate it. I always knew that I never wanted to work for somebody.
Yeah,
I
but
hate
like-
the whole, like, sit down at a desk and the teacher is like, you have to look to them, you have to listen to them, you have to take their orders, and it's like.
So are you, like, defying authority, or you're saying the education?
Well, first off, I don't like somebody else being able to tell me what the hell to do.
Okay, but that's not really an education problem, that's an authority issue.
But
Because-
the education system is based on authority right now. That's
But-
how I feel about it.
Okay,
That's
so
what it
so
seems
you
like.
feel that the education system today is built on teaching people to, what, comply to authority?
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of a requirement to life anyways? I mean, you can't
No.
just do whatever you want, whenever you want.
Well,
There is some level of,
government and-
right, but there is some level
Yeah.
of law, right, that
Okay.
governs our country.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, right? So you can't just be
Well,
like,
it's just
well, I
like
don't
you
care
go-
for authority.
You go through 4 years, you put yourself in $40,000-$50,000 in debt to get out, to not be able to find a job, and if you do, then you're working for the next 10 years.
But I
of your
guess
life.
that's what I'm getting to. Like, I think it's what you're saying is really fair, right? You're saying you work 4 years, you pay all this money, and you don't get a job. But was a job ever really the promise of a degree? I mean,
No,
look, back in the day,
Most people don't even work in the fields that they get their degrees in.
right. But so the university never promised that by signing up to the school, you're going to walk out with a job, right? Like, I mean, they never said, like, by signing this, you're buying 4 years of education to promise yourself to go to school. I mean, if we think about the school system in the beginning, it was set up really as an industrial revolution kind of thing.
Yeah.
Companies like Ford needed workers. They weren't getting quality workers. They said, hey, we're going to fund these schools. They're going to create this model. Even that's why we have bells in schools, right? Because we're
Right.
used to the old days where the lunch bells and the,
Yeah,
you know, like, yeah, right, exactly. But I'm saying that's kind of the core of why school even started, like, in a way, like, or why kind of advance into higher level education above and beyond just
Right.
literacy, right? So if those companies were funding these schools, and then they kind of like walked away and they go, okay, well, you know, we don't really need this anymore. And the information age is changing everything, right? Like, when the Google and the internets of the world are providing information that wasn't available for people. So before, if you were a person and you didn't go to school, you had no other way of getting your information, right? You couldn't just read a book on how to read a book. You have to go to school. So today is different, but I'm just curious as to, like, there was nowhere, at the beginning, maybe you had to have a job because you were going to school to be prepared to be an industrial worker, to get a job at Ford or at some company. But today, though, like in the last decade, that hasn't been the case.
A lot has changed.
Right, and nobody has then said, well, why are you, like, you didn't get a job, so the school system was a scam. Because you just walked in and you walked
Well, I
out.
don't think it's not an education thing. It's the system.
But what's wrong with the system from your perspective? I mean, you're young,
It
like
hasn't
you fit
changed.
right into it.
The system hasn't changed.
Okay,
It's been
so-
the same. It's been the same since 50 years ago, 60 years ago. They're teaching the same shit.
Okay.
The way that they do it, that you sit down in the classroom.
But there are classes that teach entrepreneurship, that
Yeah,
teach,
but-
you know, like
but it's
specifically
still the
things
same
that are.
way. It's like the same. Sit down in front of a teacher and listen to the teacher.
But what about
And-
online schools? I mean, you can go most of your
that's
classes online. right?
but you're doing that out of choice.
So
I guess we're getting college mixed up with like elementary because I hate the fact that you're forced to go through this in elementary school up through 12th grade.
Well, you
don't have a
hope you're
choice.
forced. I mean, that's a good thing because then people wouldn't be able to read or write. I mean, at the very least, you have
I
some
think
kind
if
of
you have
discipline
good-
and
order. I
order.
think if you had good parenting and they knew that education was extremely important.
Okay, but how many people have good parenting? Let's look at society and life in general, right?
What education do they go through?
Right,
Like,
but
it's
what
all
I'm-
the same. Like it's like a
But
compounding
so
effect.
okay, but so you're saying that there's people who are bad parents or good parents based on their education level?
I don't think that it's they're good or bad. I think it's that they're unaware. Like,
Okay, so if they're unaware parents, it's simply because they don't have a good education.
yeah.
So what about parents that have a good education that just don't care about their children? What about parents that are extremely
You're a shitty parent, I guess.
right? But what I'm saying is, can we rely on these people to school
No.
their kids
No,
and
definitely
not give them structure, order, and what to do?
No, but
So like the logic is, so I guess my argument is this: if you're a normal person, you knew you wanted to be photography, right? Like you're like, this is what I want to do.
at that time,
Right, this is what I want to
Yeah.
do. This is how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it. You had a plan. Maybe it was a good plan. It was a good plan. Whatever.
Yeah.
There's a plan. A lot of people coming out of high school don't have a plan. So they might be watching this video. What should they do? Should they forfeit school and say, you know what, school sucks. It doesn't matter because I'm gonna sit in the classroom. I'm gonna learn this, and that's not what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I
Like-
mean, for me, like, I'm not. I mean, when I picked up on a hobby, I knew I enjoyed something, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get good at this.
But you have friends
Yeah.
today. Like
Yeah,
you have
but-
friends
but
that like
they don't. I think it's more of like they feel like there's an expectation that they have to meet through education, through school.
by
so
whom? Like expectations
by
from whom?
parents, by
Okay.
society, like they feel like they have to meet this expectation. So they never really go off on their own path. They're never in alignment with themselves to where they give themselves like a chance to be like, this is what makes me happy. They don't know why it makes them happy. I don't know why photography made me happy or why I liked it.
But
But I did it anyways, and then it turned into this. And then through photography, I found video, and then through video, I found working with a high net worth
Right.
clients.
Yeah,
and
yeah, but-
like so, it all turns into something. It's like people don't
Right,
give
but
themselves
the
a chance.
question is, do people not give themselves a chance, or is this really the education system's mistake? Because if we're talking about education system as a whole, we're talking about an opportunity for people to further their education. Like now, that can be taken in any way, right? It can be
Well, I never
furthering
stopped
education. Right, exactly. You continue learning.
I joined Secret
Right,
Entourage while I was still in
right. So
high
you
school.
continue teaching yourself.
yeah.
Right? But what
I
I'm
learned the stuff that I wanted.
But
to
do
learn.
most people do that?
No.
Because I feel like most people have the same resources, right? And they could, I mean, we have 15-year-old kids that have access to Secret Entourage that can even afford it because they have, like, I mean, it's not expensive enough. $20 a month is not like that much.
Dude, I got in when it was like $250.
I know, but what I'm saying is like, and there are people who even have $200 a month,
Yeah.
$500 a month, or whatever it is, right? They spend them on a pair of shoes every month. And yet they choose to not go and educate themselves. So the question is, are we enough advanced as a society to be self-sufficient enough to literally say, hey, look, we don't need structure. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out our own structure. We don't need anyone to tell us what the structure is. And
No,
people
that's-
will figure it out.
That's a good point.
Because what school does.
I think people need structure.
But that's what I'm saying. But, I
But
mean,
they need to be able to pick the structure that
But
they
look,
want.
I argue, but they can. School doesn't force you to pick a degree, right?
But it forces you to feel like you need a degree.
Right, well, but that's marketing. That's their job.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Isn't
but
that
it's
their
it's
job?
a business. That's what.
But it's always been a business. Because remember, back in the day, industrial companies funded schools.
right.
And then when they pulled out, schools had to fund themselves.
Right.
So year after year, and also don't forget, the population is increasing significantly.
Yeah.
And so the cost of money is going up, and also the cost of actually like organizing the facility, the amount of volume you need over teaching a kid in a classroom.
Right.
Like think about the high school days, right? Which high school is kind of mandatory in a way. It's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
unmandatory. But you're talking about having like specifically Well, even when you're talking about like a high school, they have trailers outside. They have to allow the population to actually fit into the high school. Well, the cost basis of that goes up, right? Who pays for that? We do.
Yeah,
you know,
taxes.
like taxes pay for that.
Yeah.
But how do colleges pay for that? The buildings need to get bigger. You know, the teachers need to get like more compensated because less of them want to do it for 500 students versus 100 students. Classroom sizes need to increase. So what I'm saying is I'm not by any means defending the school system is in good shape because I think it's royally fucked. But at the very least, I'm also arguing what would life look like without.
For the most part, probably lost.
It'd be worse because I feel like we didn't have the school system.
But I feel like it depends on the person. Because there's some people who just have like an internal knowing. Like when you were young, like you didn't know what it was that drove you to make your decisions the way you did. Like even though you were like, oh, I'm poor, like my mom's struggling, like I need to do something. You still had like this knowing inside of you, like which way to go.
Well, no, I didn't.
But you did it though. See, like when you look back on it, it's like, but something made me do what I did that got me.
Well, something motivated me to do what I did, but it wasn't. I didn't know
But you
my
probably
direction.
didn't know that at the time.
I didn't know my
That's
direction.
what I mean. You don't ever really know your direction, but you have a knowing that you. But you have.
But this is.
I guess it's
well,
like.
no, this is a good argument because you knew your direction.
I didn't.
Well, you did. You chose a path, even
But
if it wasn't the right
dude, I
path.
started barbershop first, like 14 years
Right,
old.
but how old were you when you picked up a camera?
16 years old.
Okay, but you see, I didn't actually choose what I wanted to do until I was like 26. Meaning that I'm not saying I was poor or not making money or figuring out how to be good at something.
Yeah.
I'm saying that you had committed to a creative art very early, saying this is my technical skill, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't have a green card, I need to work.
Right.
So I didn't have the whole like, well, I'm gonna kind of choose this line of work, this is what interests me.
But you still knew that you had to get.
I knew I had to make money, it was different.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had to get a job. Like I knew I had to get something to make money and nobody would give me a job.
Yeah.
I was willing to work at McDonald's as much as I was willing to work at a car dealership to clean cars. It didn't matter to me, like as long as someone paid me something.
Right.
I looked at it that way, but you had a technical skill that you said, this is what I want to do. I'm going to pursue something I like doing. I didn't have that luck. Meaning I not consider luck or exposure because you had entrepreneurial parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like meaning you had people that encouraged you to try things and everything else. And I was more in the, I got to help my mom survive kind of mentality, not the other way around, which was completely like, you know, like a whole new degree of bullshit. But then I think like in a way, the school system just never caught up to itself. Like because you're looking at the cost of tuition going up and government subsidizing that with loans, right? Like so kids are coming in taking out loans to afford these, you know, these tuitions. But I think they never really came up with a plan for the increase in population. Like in other words, one of my theories for a long time about why government was so eager to fund schools, you know, with student loans that they knew they would probably never get back. You know, I was like, I kept thinking to myself, I was like, why would the government want to give out a loan that they would know they would never get back, right? Like I kept saying, like, I don't understand how that's possible. And I think one of the big things that happened that we're not talking about is that the government figured out that they were going to have to do population control. And by population control, what they had to do was they said, well, if we have all this population getting older at the same time, because the generations, they're multiplying faster. Well, if these guys all go in the workforce, then our unemployment rate skyrockets, because that means that they are now part of the unemployment pool.
Yeah.
Right? But if we delay that by sending the majority of them to school, where even a third of them end up in a technical field or something that can have a direct path to some kind of tax paying, then what we are doing is we're collecting our debt and through taxes, not through the loan. But the other thing we're also doing is we're pushing back these unemployment numbers. You know, we're keeping them low because people aren't flooding the range.
Yeah.
And we're allowing enough companies like Google and Amazon and everything to create enough jobs.
Right. I see what
To
you're
give
saying.
enough opportunity so when people come out, they kind of like can get a job and become a taxpayer. Because I think that...
So you're saying that loans get paid back through taxes?
No, I'm not saying they directly, not a one-on-one basis,
Yeah.
but obviously government functions on taxes,
Yeah,
which are
for
mandatory for all people
So
working.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is I find that sometimes a student loan, it's a pool system, so it's like the insurance model, right? Like if you're State Farm, and you collect insurance money from people, right? Like because you're doing it on the basis that only 10% will have a claim.
Right.
You know, like so you're not actually having enough money if all people had a claim at the same time.
So you're saying they're banking on people getting out and not getting jobs?
They're banking, no, the opposite. They're banking on the idea that when people don't get jobs, like and can't pay these back, right, it will be a smaller percentage, right, of the general population that is getting job and paying taxes at least.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that maybe they're not collecting like $20 a month, $80 a month for $10,000 of their money, but they're also pushing someone to pay $2,000 a week in taxes. You know, like so what it's doing is it's pushing people into this model. And I think one of the big things for government is that it's pushing an entire population. Because remember, elections are also built on numbers, right? Like everybody wants to get elected based on low unemployment numbers. And I think a long time ago, government figured out that the best way to keep unemployment numbers low is to prevent population increase into unemployment. And there's nothing worse than someone that comes out of high school, goes into the workforce directly, because a lot more people graduate high school than college. But therefore, they immediately impact the employment number, not 4 years later while they're in school considered a student.
Right.
So if a student is in school, they're not considered part of the unemployment pool. So what ends up happening is that if everybody left right out of high school and said, listen, I get it now, I'm going to go look for a job, there wouldn't be enough time to delay this process of getting into jobs.
I see what you're saying.
So I feel like, as a whole, I feel like the school system is actually, and I think that's why nobody focuses on the importance of the quality of the education. You know, nobody is like focusing on, well, this state college, you know, is this a skill people are going to use, or they're teaching chemistry or some crap, you know, that you're sitting there like, why am I listening to this? You know, why do I even need an elective or something like this? But at the same time, I also think you're not realizing that they don't care as much about the internal process, because that's a means of kind of like a machine that's slowing down the conveyor belt.
Right.
You know, so
They
instead of
not even see it. Nobody knows this shit, dude.
Well, but
like the way you just explained it, people have no idea that that's
right, but I think that's one thing. I don't think that's all of it, but I think that's one piece of it.
For the most part.
But I think that's what state colleges are, right? Like maybe not Ivy League schools that are training, you know, like top of the line students, whatever. But I think a lot of state colleges and opportunities for children who don't have the same type of money or parents to buy them opportunity, I think that gives them a road. You know, kind of like, hey, look, this machine is like the poor people machine. You go through this conveyor belt, and there's a jam, and it's going slowly popping you guys out one at a time, instead of everybody jumping on the conveyor belt at the same time and breaking the machine. Yeah. Versus the Ivy League schools, you get all these kids that are like paying their way up, but they're also getting their networking into these bigger companies that are coming there saying, well, you're getting the best education, we want the best people, you know, and we're going to further get you. But we've actually seen something interesting, is that a lot of businesses are now opening their own universities. Like Google has their own universities, Amazon has their own universities, which makes sense, but in a way it's funny because it's going back to industrialism, which was Ford and GM were like funding these companies, get it? Like we're funding the schools all the time. It's just a new way. But I think that I have another argument, which is that technically the school system is so like, one of the big things that people don't realize is that technology, I think, has destroyed the internal version of the school system, because 20 years ago, like I said, if you didn't know somebody, you had to go to school to learn. You didn't even have the internet to know what your neighbor did or who your neighbor was. Yeah. If you didn't walk over his house and like knock on his door and go, hey, you got a Mercedes, what do you do for a living? Like, I'm trying to be like you, like, what do you do that you have this big house? I don't know. Yeah. Today, you can look that up on anybody. You know, you can see people's net worth online, you can see what businesses are involved in. People want their brands out there. Right. So like, I even spend money to get people to like know, hey, I own all these companies, like you should visit them, right? So in a way, like I always think that shift in technology has also helped great teachers share their message across 20 universities, versus before you had a teacher and you didn't really have a choice. You walked to that school, they were like, who's my chemistry teacher? It's that guy. Okay, I'm gonna send him to chemistry. But I think today you also have the potential of finding specifically a teacher, like that's extremely talented, because teaching is a talent, and that teacher saying, well, I'm really good at teaching chemistry. I'm not gonna teach 10,000 students here in my school, but students that are not in my school can also get my learning on this site for $500 instead of a $50,000 tuition. Right. Now someone could say, well, yeah, but you don't get an accredited degree when you get the learning. But I think that's the big problem, is that the biggest issue with education is not any of these things we talked about, which are all important but problems, is that we have brainwashed society for 10 plus years to connect, or let me rephrase that, for 50 plus years, to connect their mental state to the need for a piece of paper. So someone actually believes that carrying a piece of paper holds more weight than the content or the information they're learning in the school.
Yeah,
so you see, there is the answer. The best way to fix the education system is to undo the brainwashing and to disconnect for people the link from how one person can use a piece of paper, and that is the answer to their job. So if you want to fix the school system, I say you make it illegal for schools to use jobs or to use a path to financial wealth or some type of job or a career as marketing. Because if you break that down for people, if you go to people and you say, listen, you're paying $40,000 to learn, you're not paying $40,000 to get a job, I think you're going to see a huge runoff in schools.
I agree.
And I think if you tell companies to stop asking people for these dumb pieces of paper that they're not going to do anything with, then
But you
I
think
think
that's going to change?
No, but I think
companies make it happen.
Well, no,
like they're a huge part of the problem.
No, but look, Google, Amazon, they all took down their needs for degrees for most companies. Most of them say unless you have a technical thing and you need this certification, this type of programming,
right,
you don't need a degree to apply for a job. And I think that opens people's thoughts to saying, I can apply, and if I want to further my education, I'm going to go to Google school, and in Google school I'm going to learn how to be a better manager, or how to do this or that.
Right.
And I think those are relevant trade skills, right? But I think the issue again is that what we talked about earlier is that while my ideas are maybe fantastic and like this is what should happen in common sense, the problem I think is that it won't solve the population problem we talked about.
Right.
So if you say, well, listen, PJ, you're fucking great, you just share something nobody like knew. But then we're also by saying, well, you can't advertise papers anymore, you can't say degrees, everybody goes to school, nobody gets a degree, right? And then we'll see who really wants to be in school, right? But the problem becomes that even if you say that and it works, meaning people don't go to school, well then you've offsetted the population problem. Get it? Like you've made it now more likely that the conveyor belt is going to break.
Right.
So I think that's why the school system is completely fucked, because it's kind of built over a process, like you said, that's 20 years old, and it's also built over a process that's needed for population control, and is built on a model that's 20 years old that can't catch up to itself. So, but if one breaks, then the other one can't survive without this. So it's kind of like this tripod that has to exist.
Right.
So I think that that's kind of like basically why the school system can never be fixed. Even though people keep saying like we need free education, like we need free college, like some places do. I don't think that.
I guess you just don't play a part in it. That's really
but I just
it's
don't.
like I don't like the whole college thing. Doesn't the talk about college, the job thing? It doesn't affect me because I'm not in that system. That's not my reality.
Right.
Like I'm out of it. I took myself out of that a long time ago because I was so. That was another reason was because there was so much talk about it.
Right. So I guess my argument here is that we need to get to a place where we have new ways, new plans for people, so that it solves the population problem. Because if it solves the population problem, it will solve the rest. Does that make sense? Like the rest can switch. So anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this. And if you have any comments, if you agree, disagree, or feel like this is horrible, a great idea, or no, it can't be fixed, put a comment below. I would just love to hear your thoughts. And let's have an open discussion about how we can solve the school system. And solving it, as you heard in this conversation, may not mean just putting on better teachers, giving free education to the world, but instead coming up with a viable solution that hits both population control, what is taught in schools, and of course how people and how young people can get disconnected from this idea that they are going to get a degree that is going to lead them to a job. So anyways, hope you enjoy this. Give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. Shout out to JT here for being on and sharing his thoughts. And again, guys, I'll catch you next time in another video. Take care.